that's the level of competence, right? When you can reach a level of flexibility, because in my mind, competence and flexibility and experience all kind of come together, like to make it a flexible thing, so you can see those other options. So you're not just robotically walking up to the door and placing your charge without checking first, right? And I think that's where we want to talk about the NCO core a little bit, and your take on this, Preston.
Yep.
Is that experience, I think, lies in those dudes with the repetition and the experience to be able to see beyond the training scenarios and to make things, flexible and make sense beyond just we've been tasked with A, therefore we're going to do B.
So a couple of things, and I've got to actually, to be fair and just, I got to play both sides of this, right? And so I'm going to start with the negative, and then I'm going to go to the positive. Well, I'll start by saying this. 90% of the times I'm brought to teams, I'm brought by either warrant officers or NCOs. The officers don't really get involved because it's the warrants and the NCOs that are doing the training and the education. So that's where I spend most of my time. You should also know that when I took a tour internationally and went to all the Five Eyes around the world I was working with all their selections. Just happened to be 1 year where I hit every single team. And I knew I was doing this tour, and so I decided to ask a series of questions. And one of the questions I asked was, in a 20-year career, is the last 5 years of an NCO's career, last 5 years of 20, a net gain or a net loss for the teams? And what do you think the universal answer was?
Net win.
It was net loss with an asterisk. Net loss, except for the one or two guys that are carrying the whole team. So you end up with this bifurcation in about 15 years. You get the tribal elders that are treasured and honored, and then you get a bunch of dinosaurs that are making things worse, not doing their jobs. They're brick walls in terms of innovation. They're clinging to legacy, a lot of these other things. And so what I would say is the NCOs are so critical to the functioning of a fast-moving team, and that we are not working hard enough to do job creation for their full career. We're often milking them for 5 or 10 years, breaking them, and then shoving them aside while they're still in service. And I think what SOCOM should do, because they're such I can't emphasize enough how critical they are to the success of small fluid teams. We have to be much more intentional about their time left in the rain, and we have much more intentional about what happens afterwards. And so in a perfect world, right, like one of the arguments that's being made by us and others is that NCOs now need the same level of educational knowledge that officers need in order to go after rapidly emerging complex adaptive problem sets. So what that means, though, is that what we can do is that we can run them hard for a few years, break them out, let them go to school, put them back into the training command so they can start demonstrating some of that, and then come back either into recruitment or into leadership, higher leadership, so that there's a progression both physically and intellectually, as opposed to just leaving me in the woods for 20 years.
Yeah. You would call it officers get cultivated and enlisted, or NCOs get extracted. Is that right?
Yeah. So cultivation versus extraction. So this is a model that's really, it's controversial, but we put it forward. And basically there's two models of human development. I'm really broad brushing it here. So I'm making some generalizations for the point of illustration, but there's one model in which we take a human and we cultivate them throughout their career so that we make them both better for us, but better for the country. There's another model where we cultivate them intensely for a short period of time, 2, 3, 4 years, and then we extract all of that knowledge as long as we can before we break them. And then we're like disposable, like, okay, you're good. And too often we're treating NCOs as disposable when they're actually a national asset. And so what we need to do is start cultivating them. But I'll say this before we go blaming the institution and the culture and the officers. You should know that some of my biggest pushback against these ideas comes from NCOs.
Oh, I don't doubt that.
Yeah.
I don't doubt that
When
one
you're
bit.
talking about it and you're like, you got to get them out of the field. I'm like, there are some guys that are going to fight you
to the
real
death.
hard on that.
That's why I'm an NCO. I didn't want to come out of the field.
That's right.
If I wanted to come out of the field, I would have been an officer.
That's right. Except that we actually know what that looks like 15 or 20 years in. And that's the part that the NCOs don't know, that I, after 15 or 20 years, let me put it this way, just to put a really clear point on this. MCT, Mission Critical Team Institute, was founded in 2016, incubated at the Wharton School for 3 years, independent in 2018. It's now 2024. So that's 8 years we're in business. I've buried one of my friends every year of those 8 years in fire and special operations and medicine, right? The life cycle on you guys isn't fucking awesome. And unless we're going to start to have honest conversations about the long-term impact of the hard life, then we're going to continue to bury our friends. And I'm over it. Like, I've done my time, so I can just feel frank about it. My job isn't to create short-term wins. My job is to create amazing people that can go on and be grandfathers. But that means some things are going to have to change.
Yeah, some of this is it's hard though, right? Like, because we are talking about like the institution and how as an NCO and a senior NCO later on in your career you can provide value,
yeah,
or how you're allowed to provide value. Like, this is my personal experience is at the end of my career.
Yeah,
you walk into these offices where like you're still seen as just a ground pounder, bearded Neanderthal.
Yep.
And you're like, hey, I have this many years training folks.
Yeah.
And these are the solutions that I've seen. But the O-Corps, and it's not really their fault, I guess, they're not really designed to like accept your solutions and to implement them or to like take that into account, because you're just a senior NCO. You're not on team anymore. Like we always talk about, as an E6, I had way more power to affect change at the ground level than I did as an E8.
So can I just push some examples? CZ Lopez, right? Colin Lopez, right? Greg Smith, right? Both of them from your organization, I believe, right? Both of them had massive influence on the entire way special operations are run. Massive influence. But it meant not going from, this is my experience, this is how you do it, boss, but instead going in and being like, tell me what your cool ideas are. Let me help translate that into what actually will fucking happen. And let's actually go for effect here. So let me partner with you. So I would only argue that I think people are sometimes unsuccessful because they're used to using the methodologies they used as a young NCO and try to do that with officers, and it won't work. But if you're willing to flex and speak their language, you can accomplish cool things.
Yeah, I've seen it both ways, I guess.
Yeah.
I should have just been like, you're right. I'm sorry.
No,
one of those feels like
just
working
an
with an
optimist.
officer, though. So
What?
one of them feels like working with an officer, though, and that's the part that I don't like. So how do we force them to do what we want without actually having to acknowledge that they're people?
Yeah. Let me know how that works out, Aaron. Just
Okay.
give me
Right.
some.
Well, let me tell you, from 22 years, it hasn't gone well.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
Really shocking.
Okay.
Shocking.
Figure
You guys
it
can
out.
just shut up and do what I tell you. Has never
put
once
that
worked
one in your
for me.
little book, Doc. I got some numbers messing up your means and your averages and stuff.
Yeah. Never once worked.